So I saw Fantastic Four, and I didn't like it. The end. There you go, a review just as rushed and truncated as the movie itself. I'm kidding, I care more than that, so unfortunately you get to listen to me yammer on for several more minutes about why I didn't like Marvel's latest blockbuster, if you want to call it that, and if you want to commit your life minutes to yet another movie nerd complaining about a big corporate behemoth here on YouTube. Sorry, it's not going to be quick, but it is going to be dirty, just like they did my boy John Malkovich. The Fantastic Four, The First Steps, a title which is largely nonsense and actually holds no meaning to the film itself, is written by a bunch of people who also co-wrote other Marvel movies with a bunch of other people and is directed by Matt Shakman. This is Shakman's second feature film outing and his first in over a decade, if my math is right. He's largely known for his work in TV, having directed episodes of House MD, Game of Thrones, Succession, and perhaps found his biggest success as the director for WandaVision, Marvel's Disney Plus series from 2021. Fantastic Four: The First Steps stars Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, Eben Moss-Backrack as Ben Grimm, and Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. The four characters, who are either blood relatives or close friends, all go up in space on an exploratory mission together, get hit by cosmic rays which alter their DNA, and they return to Earth transformed into a group of superheroes with distinct and different superpowers. And that's pretty much all the movie gives us to work with. Marvel's gotten into a bad habit of thinking that since they're 20 years deep into the MCU, and because these characters have existed in multiple mediums for decades, that it's now okay to forego any foundation of writing or any sort of character backstories or motivations. They did this with Spider-Man, and the result is a character with no real reason to do the things he does other than the fact that he's a good kid and he looks up to Tony Stark. As such, he spent 3 movies fighting villains that are not his own and never developing any depth or motivation of his own beyond being a good kid who looked up to Tony Stark. Here, we get decades of nuanced writing and complex characterizations rolled into a quick TV montage-style explanation of who the Fantastic Four are, where they came from, and that they've been doing the hero thing on an alternate universe Earth for 4 years. And as we move along through the largely uninteresting and rushed plot, I'm sorry, I know, leave a comment down below. There are confusing and frustrating attempts at forcing characterization on these characters when they haven't been earned and no hints of them have been dropped prior. Like, for example, longtime fans of the Fantastic Four know that Reed Richards can be kind of a dick. He's such an analytical mind and such a near draconian thinker in his adherence to logic and science that he frequently alienates and even finds himself at odds with both his family and his allies. What was touched upon with Tony Stark in previous Marvel movies, the idea that Stark knows better than everybody else and thinks he should make decisions for the better of everyone, but they're decisions that actually take away free will and personal agency, is only barely glossed over in Fantastic Four with Reed Richards, and in weirdly startling ways. Reed's wife, Sue Storm, played by Vanessa Kirby, just randomly attacks Reed for such things when the struggles really start, even though up to this point all we've ever seen is a gosh golly gee willikers, sweet and somewhat timid version of Reed, who just seems to get along with everybody, even if being the smartest guy in the room makes humor and social cues hard for him to pick up on. In a conversation that should have probably taken place in a sequel and been set up in a first film, we're suddenly asked to see Reed the way Sue allegedly sees him, and it's never earned. It's never hinted at to us as the audience. It becomes a weirdly confusing and tone-deaf scene that ends up making Sue look like a jerk and just looking to Reed as a target for her stress. And that sucks. And it happens a lot in this movie. Large portions of this movie are never earned, never built up to for the audience, and we're left with strangely disconnected scenes, plot points, and forced attempts at characterization that create for a messy film that just left me feeling cold and frustrated in the end. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the cast for a bit. The main actors portraying the Fantastic Four, with the unfortunate exception of Pedro Pascal, they're all inspired casting. Vanessa Kirby is the heart of the film, if one must be designated, and she's a wonderful actress saddled with writing that should have been left in the first draft and the characterization problems I mentioned before. Like many of the Fantastic Four story arcs over the years, this one is very Sue-centric, and the movie would probably fail entirely if not for having as strong a lead actress as Kirby in that role. Pedro Pascal is not great as Reed Richards. I'm sorry. And it's not his fault. I love the man, I really do. There were a lot of rumors circulating that Marvel had a ton of issues in trying to find an actor to take the role, notions that no one was interested because the script was very Sue Storm-centric and the role of Reed was too much of a second fiddle, rumors that the role of Reed just didn't have enough meat on its bones for a high-profile actor to latch onto, and rumors that the script was just lacking in general. There seemed to be a mad dash to find somebody to take the role in order to keep the movie on schedule. Enter Pedro Pascal, who has been something of a sweetheart for Disney after the success of The Mandalorian, and who just seems like an easygoing guy who just loves acting. And seemingly somebody who is willing to set ego aside to be part of a fun genre project, so he took up the role. And I'm kind of inclined to believe that the rumors were largely true. Whatever direction Pascal received from Matt Shakman never rings true with what the other characters in the movie are telling us about Reed. We never see hints of this dry, analytical thinking that causes Sue actual pain. We never see the coldness that causes Johnny to say he speaks badly of Reed to himself when he's alone, even if he says so half-jokingly. I mean, shit, we never get a sense that Reed and Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, are longtime friends, and that Ben has basically swore a life debt to Reed and will always have his back. The movie relies on our fondness for the actors to carry the emotional weight of the relationships between these characters, and for a franchise most famous for the relationships between these characters and the dynamics, both good and bad, that make them a family, it's incredibly disappointing to see those dynamics being just set dressing at best. And you could honestly call the film an outright failure from the jump in that regard. Joseph Quinn is fun as a more comic-accurate portrayal of Johnny Storm than what we saw in the Fox films. Johnny started out and largely remained as a goober and saw himself as hot shit, while everybody else around him saw through the facade but just kind of knew he was a dipshit. Quinn seems to get that, and his quips and his attitudes of the movie are pretty close to pitch perfect. He's saddled with a lot of really bad jokes and one recurring gag in the movie that just never really lands, but Quinn makes it work for his part with his poise, good comedic timing, and overall just knowing the assignment, even if the writers and director don't necessarily seem to. Ebon Moss-Bachrach is perhaps the most inspired bit of casting in the film, and the addition to the cast that had me the most excited. I absolutely love his turn as Richie in FX's The Bear, and the man is able to convey multiple layers of emotion and turmoil with just his eyes alone, which of course is essential when playing a character that's otherwise made entirely of orange rock. But we never f***ing get any of that depth and turmoil that has made The Thing an enduring and endearing character for over 60 years, because the movie is set 4 years after the events that turn these people into superpowered heroes. We've never seen them have to deal with the emotional weight of accepting the terrifying physical changes they each went through, and accepting the weight of deciding to use those powers to help people. And this goes doubly for Ben Grimm. We're 4 years removed from him losing his outward humanity, being feared and looked away from by people the world over while he's trying to save them, and going through the awful depression and anger of being turned into a rock monster. Here, everybody loves him, they approach him on the street, kids wear Halloween costumes of him, and they ask him to lift cars when they see him. There's very, very little here for a fine, nuanced actor like Ebon Moss-Bachrach to sink his teeth into, and as such, one of my favorite comic book characters ever, and one of the most tragic and interesting of all time, is largely just two-dimensional. Just there to be a calming voice while everybody else is losing their cool, and to be the requisite CGI strongman in a Marvel movie. The film doesn't really have any heart. We're robbed of all these characterizations that make the heroes compelling. We're given a bare-bones characterization of who they are and what they want to do and why they do it. And the plot of the film barely even meets those characterizations halfway. Galactus is coming, and he's gonna eat Earth. We know this because Silver Surfer randomly shows up after the movie is done, tenuously establishing this universe, and she just tells us. So the Fantastic Four somehow use science to triangulate where the Surfer has been and magically turns that into knowing where Galactus is right at that moment. Somehow, Reed Richards is able to follow the Silver Surfer's trail of radiation and energy signatures throughout all of space, hundreds of light years away. I guess Earth 828 has been super busy launching satellites throughout the universe instead of improving television and radio signals beyond what our own Earth had in the 60s. Anyway, the movie doesn't even tell us the characters know where Galactus is until they're almost there. They abruptly just schedule a launch in a spaceship, they blast off and hook up with a faster-than-light engine like the hyperspace rings in Attack of the Clones. And once they've nearly reached Galactus, the film is like, oh, we should tell the audience where the f*** they're going and how they even figured out how to get there. And when we get there, Galactus is in the middle of finishing off a planet to feed on. Perfect timing. The heroes end up on Galactus' ship, and he immediately senses the power of Sue's unborn child, Franklin, and decides that Franklin is powerful enough to take over Galactus' curse and free him to finally rest after time immemorial of snacking on entire planets. He says he'll trade Earth's survival in exchange for taking Franklin as his heir, and the heroes obviously disagree for clear reasons. even though Sue later accuses Reed of considering handing over their baby. Because he's apparently this awful asshole, even though we're never shown this, ever. The Fantastic Four escape back to Earth, a trip which takes them a month. Galactus and Silver Surfer immediately follow them, but for inexplicable reasons stop at Jupiter and cruise at an incredibly slow speed from that point on, so that the movie can have a really drawn-out second act and the heroes can have time to formulate a plan to, yeah, this is a real thing, use a subplot involving Reed inventing teleportation to shoot Earth through space and into another galaxy where Galactus won't be able to find them. The plan involves using a teleportation system that requires a point A module to send an object to a point B module to receive it. But because movie, and because the writers really need to get this movie done so that Doctor Doom can be in the next Avengers, decided the receiving module isn't a thing anymore, and Earth can just be shot through space without a target, but can magically land within a 2% margin of safe space in an entirely hospitable new solar system with a compatible sun and everything. This movie is actually every bit as dumb as the Fox Fantastic Four movies. But the gloss of good actors and better special effects and playing all of this weirdly straight-faced is meant to try and fool the audience into thinking it's not. But we're way past silly Marvel logic here, and we're straight into nonsense that just doesn't add up if you spend more than 10 seconds thinking about it. Shit goes bad when the woefully underutilized Julia Gardner as the Silver Surfer shows up after just hanging out in space and not doing a whole lot, I guess. And she does so just in time to blow up all the teleportation thingies seconds before Earth was about to be yeeted to who the hell knows where. Then all of a sudden Galactus finds his gas pedal and he gets to Earth too. So the heroes pivot using the last teleportation thingy on Earth in a plan to get rid of Galactus and plan on using their baby Franklin as bait, even though it's been established that Galactus can sense where Franklin is, and doing a literal switcheroo with an empty baby basket will not work. This movie smacks of not really having a solid idea of who and what Galactus is, and just grasping at straws for a third act. The heroes are also banking on the idea that Galactus is going to shrink down to a reasonable enough size to walk the streets of New York to go pick up a kid, even though the last time they saw him he was gigantic and they're actually not even aware of his size-changing abilities. A surprisingly uneventful quasi-battle happens where Sue taps into the strength of being a mom and becomes strong enough to almost push Galactus through the usual Marvel magical portal. Thankfully, Johnny Storm has been working on a nonsensical subplot of learning the Silver Surfer's language through recordings of conversations that she's had with aliens on multiple planets, including her own, that somehow Reed is logging onto literal f***ing gold records in his lab on Earth. Because how the f***, I don't know. I don't even know. Johnny uses the record to convince the Surfer to ex-machina herself into Galactus' gut at the last second and pushes him into the distant solar system. The heroes win, and that's the movie. Until two goofy post-credit scenes. Everything about this movie's production had me worried, but cautiously optimistic. Marvel kept saying that the movie was about family and a return to form for the brand new Phase 6 of movies. And we're getting back on track and we're heading towards a huge 2-movie event again like Infinity War and Endgame. And then we heard the rumors about Marvel having trouble even getting people to be in the movie. That the script was no good. And when the runtime broke in the news, a lot of people were worried that this was going to be a brief, hurried dash to Avengers Doomsday, and that the Fantastic Four weren't going to get their due. And sadly, I feel like that's what we got. A very slight movie with no real gravitas or weight. Characterization for some of the best and most realized comic book characters ever removed entirely. And an experience that just feels hollow and weirdly cynical. Instead of being its own movie and the start of a franchise with honest-to-goodness effort and heart behind it, what Fantastic Four: The First Steps feels like is just one hurried step towards just getting these characters out there so that there's the bare minimum of context for them in Doomsday and Secret Wars. And f*** it. I've been saying for a while now that Fantastic Four was going to be make or break for me for the MCU once and for all. If they somehow managed and failed to treat these characters with the reverence they deserve, then I would be done seeing MCU movies in theaters. Call me full of shit, saying being hyperbolic in the comments, I don't care. I'm gonna wait for streaming to see how badly they mess up X-Men, and my interest in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars is all dried up at this point. I hope that other people really enjoy this movie though, and that the MCU still holds a spark for them. I think my time with these movies has come to an end, and while it's a disappointing and frustrating end, there was a stretch where that time was pretty magical. I mean, for a decade, I had an awesome time not only seeing some favorite characters realized on the screen, but I also had a lot of fun in rediscovering more obscure characters. So once again, feel free to yell at me in the comments below and tell me I'm dumb. If you've made it this far into the video, or if you've even finished it, then you've earned it. Unlike the $280 million box office take this movie is set to take over the weekend.